60 million years ago, along the coast of Africa, an early elephant ancestor waded into the waters. The descendants of this animal slowly evolved to become suited for a life in the water, eventually transforming into fully marine mammals. We know these animals today as the Sirenians, manatees and dugongs. But they weren't the only mammals to return to the water. Dolphins, seals, and even whales evolved from terrestrial ancestors. So why did these mammals return to the sea? The answer takes us back millions of years and may hold profound secrets about evolution itself. Whales are some of the most fascinating creatures on the planet. These giants dominate the open sea, reaching sizes unmatched in Earth's history. Despite ruling the seas today, whales began their evolutionary journey on land. Their transition to the ocean begins 50 million years ago on the Indian subcontinent. But what kind of animals did they actually evolve from? The mystery of their origins puzzled scientists until 1966, when the first theory was proposed. Initially, scientists believed whales evolved from Mesonicians, carnivorous hoofed mammals with sharp triangular teeth. But we now know that cetaceans are artiodactyls, with the hippo being their closest living relative. Although the first cetaceans evolved in the early Eocene, hippos evolved much later, meaning their aquatic traits evolved independently. The fossil record contains few clues about the early evolution of cetaceans, but fossils dating to 48 million years ago in what is now Kashmir show us something strange. The creature these fossils belong to, known as Indohyus, wasn't an ancestor of cetaceans. In fact, it has no living descendants, but it's more closely related to cetaceans than any other creature in the fossil record. And its characteristics suggest that the aquatic adaptations can be traced to long before the cetaceans. While Indohyus hints at the early stages of aquatic adaptation, the earliest true cetaceans, Pachycetidae, emerged around 50 million years ago, near the ancient Tethys Sea. They were very different from any modern species though. Living in very arid environments, they sought refuge in temporary streams and floodplains. With eyes on the top of their heads, they would have been able to hide beneath the water whilst watching for prey. This hunting strategy remains successful to this day, with crocodiles in particular mastering this style. Just 1 million years later, a key evolutionary step came with Ambulocetus. But what was this important step? They had evolved to tolerate salty water. This enabled them to move beyond small streams and venture into the ocean. Although restricted to the coast, recent findings suggest that Ambulocetus may have already been fully aquatic, leaving behind a terrestrial life much earlier than previously thought. Eventually, Ambulocetus died out, but shortly after, the Remingtonocetidae appeared off the coast of India. Just by looking at them, you can tell that they were far more specialized, and these adaptations proved to be very successful. Although the first to reach beyond Asia were the Protocetids, not only did they leave the waters of India, but they spread to Europe, Africa, and North America, populating shallow subtropical oceans worldwide, becoming more and more specialized as time went on. Some species like Rhodocetus retained hooves, linking them to their ancestors. Despite their marine lifestyle, they still relied on land in one crucial way. They gave birth on the shore, meaning they needed to keep short limbs and only had limited underwater hearing. The transition from only venturing onto land to give birth and never leaving the ocean took place about 43.3 million years ago, with the evolution of the basilosaurids. Like the protocetids, the basilosaurids had a worldwide oceanic distribution, which was centered around the equator. Basilosaurids specialized in eating fish, and were the first cetaceans to attain really enormous sizes. The largest of them, Basilosaurid, reached 18 meters, just a few meters shorter than the blue whale, marking the transition to giants. Whales today form two major groups, the baleen whales and the toothed whales, some of whom you'd never guess were related to each other. Baleen whales are filter feeders, using comb-like structures to capture krill and plankton. This efficient feeding strategy is the only way they can get so big, as it provides a huge amount of energy. But why would they evolve their massive sizes? It seems counterintuitive, but one major reason is that it helps them conserve energy. Being big also helps them stay warm, avoid predators, and catch more food. All of these pressures cause them to grow over time, and they will likely continue to do so into the future. Just like how the feeding method of the baleen whales helped them to survive, the toothed whales evolved their own game-changing adaptation, echolocation, giving them an advantage in murky and deep waters. And as I said before, you wouldn't call a lot of the toothed whales whales, as this group includes orcas, sperm whales, dolphins, and even narwhals. But cetaceans were not the only marine mammals that started out on land. The pinnipeds, seals, sea lions, and walruses descend from terrestrial ancestors too. Although they share many similarities to cetaceans, the path that evolution took them on is very different. Including when it started, pinnipeds evolved much later than cetaceans, with their journey into the sea beginning around 27 million years ago. Pinnipeds, unlike cetaceans, are carnivorans. More specifically, they belong to a group known as the arctoids, which includes animals like bears, weasels, and raccoons. But why did they transition to an aquatic lifestyle? The earliest true pinniped was in Alearctos, living off the coast of what is now North America. This creature could move on both land and water, and in many ways was more similar to sea otters than its descendants. It's likely they started out hunting fish in the ocean whilst living on land, and over time became more and more adapted to hunting in water, eventually becoming almost completely aquatic. It was at the time of Alearctos that the pinnipeds diverged into their two main branches, the otarids and the phocids. The otarids are what we know as fur seals and sea lions, who have a greater ability to maneuver on land than their cousins, which came as an adaptation to rocky coastlines. Their ears retain good hearing on land, allowing them to communicate in crowded colonies. Phocids, or true seals, took a different approach. They lost the ability to rotate their hind flippers, making it almost impossible to traverse on land. But in the ocean, they easily outperform the otarids, being able to swim much faster and dive much deeper. All pinnipeds evolved a layer of blubber to keep them warm in the cold, icy habitats which they call home. The reason they mostly live in cold waters is likely because dolphins would outcompete them in warmer regions. But there's actually a third group of pinnipeds which are by far the strangest, the walruses. Unlike the primarily fish-eating seals, walruses specialize in creatures found on the seafloor. Of course, their most recognizable feature are their tusks. Fossils suggest they once roamed more widely, but over time as the climate changed, they became restricted to just the Arctic Circle. Out of all aquatic mammals, the Sirenians have the most fascinating story. Sirenians are the only fully aquatic herbivorous mammals, with the dugongs and manatees being the only living members. They can trace their roots to the mysterious and ancient lineage of mammals known as Afrotheria, which contains animals like elephants and aardvarks. It was only 50 million years ago that the ancestors of the Sirenians and elephants diverged. Whilst elephants came to dominate land, Sirenians took to the water. These early Sirenians were small four-legged animals that mostly inhabited freshwater environments. One of the earliest known species is Proastomus, from what is now Jamaica. Some of the important adaptations that mark turning points in their evolution include losing their limbs, increasing their bone weight, evolving flippers, and becoming much larger, all of which assisted them in grazing underwater. Since these animals only eat grass and low-calorie plant matter, they can't afford to expend as much energy as carnivorous species. This is why they are notoriously slow and have a very low metabolism for an animal their size, restricting them to just the tropics today. The dugongs and manatees are very genetically distinct, with their lineages splitting off 34 million years ago. Dugongs adapted to shallow marine habitats in the Indian and Pacific Oceans, whilst manatees came to inhabit both marine and freshwater habitats in the Americas and Africa. Although only 4 species of Sirenian remain today, just a few hundred years ago, a giant roamed the waters of the North Pacific, Steller's sea cow, a distant relative of the dugong. Whilst the largest dugongs today only reach 3.5 meters, the sea cow was so much bigger. Adapting to the colder water, it reached 10 meters and 4,000 kilograms. Bigger than any other Sirenian to ever exist. Instead of feeding on seagrass, these giants specialized on kelp and evolved a thick layer of blubber. The sea cow was already rare when it was discovered in 1741, shrinking from a much wider range during the Pleistocene. Their story gets even more tragic, however. In the frigid North Pacific, a careful balance existed between sea otters, urchins, and kelp forests. The sea cow, who relied on kelp for food, could only survive if this balance was maintained. But when humans showed up, they slaughtered sea otters in huge numbers, destroying the ancient balance and thus the food source for sea cows. This, combined with people killing them and their already very low population, estimated at less than 2,000 before European arrival, led to their extinction, with the last confirmed sighting just 27 years after its discovery. Whilst the sea cow lives on through its relatives, some extinct giants are only known from the fossil record, one of which was the largest land mammal to ever exist. But if you want to find out about that, you'll have to watch this video.